Okay, just a little preview. This is actually take 2 on the repair of a 1965 RCA Scholastic 4-speed tube classroom record player. The reason for take 2 is because Warner Music Group, otherwise known as WMG, got their panties in a knot over something that was in take 1. Sometimes when I'm testing a particular radio or record player or demonstrating a troubleshooting procedure, it's necessary that I have audio playing on the device. Well, I try to be careful and not let audio pass through that's A, over 30 seconds in length, because I think that's the maximum amount of time allowed, or B, I try to stick with audio that won't trigger the copyright police. Well, sometimes, despite our best efforts of being careful, sometimes something will slip through. Here is the record that slipped through. The Barkays Soul Finger. Now that was a popular soul instrumental during the 60s. However, for this record player demonstration, I played the B-side, which is entitled Knucklehead. I figured a B-side that was 50 years old wouldn't get the attention of anybody, but apparently I was wrong. The second this video was uploaded, I got an email from YouTube saying that WMG had claimed copyright and that my video was blocked in one country, and that one country turned out to be the United States. So out of disgust, I just deleted the whole video and said I'll just try again without that particular song. Now, I might could understand WMG and these other music publishers getting their panties in a knot if I were uploading crystal clear full-length songs to my YouTube channel so people could copy them. However, that's not what happened here. I simply let about 45 seconds of a scratched up, worn 45 RPM record play on a lo-fi record player, all being picked up by the lo-fi microphone in this camera. Now you tell me how that's costing anybody anything or hurting anybody, but these music publishers, mainly WMG, are so paranoid. They're so afraid that any amount of their music being presented anywhere is going to actually cost them a few cents, and heaven forbid they can't have that happen. I was discussing this with someone on one of the antique radio pages, and they said I could file a fair use appeal, but what's the point? Me going up against these big money bags it's a waste of time. I would lose every time. So we're just going to delete the offending song. When we get to that portion of the video where I was testing something with the record player with that song, I will just have to explain to you as best I can what was done. But it just really irritates me that they're just so paranoid about all this copyright BS. And honestly, whenever I'm repairing a radio or record player or whatever, I've got more on my mind than worrying about if the wrong song is going to slip through or if more than 30 seconds of a song slipped through. All I've got on my mind is presenting the restoration and concentrating on what needs to be done to repair the item in question. I don't have time to be worried about the YouTube copyright BS. But unfortunately, I guess if I'm going to continue to do this, I'm going to have to worry about it because I don't want to get my channel axed because of some bull crap like this. Okay, now with all of that said, let's move on to the restoration of the record player. Here's something you don't see every day, an RCA Scholastic classroom record player from 1965. This is a tube type unit. Uses a 50 C5 output tube, 12 AV6 preamp tube, and 35 W4 rectifier tube. This has the usual problems. Motor's froze up, won't turn. The amplifier needs capacitors. Let it warm up and I'll show you. As you can hear, we have a little filter hum there. I'm not getting any audio amplification at the cartridge terminals. This particular unit takes well, here's the cartridge that came out of it, an 89T power point that the tips appear to be shot on. So let's open it up and try to rehabilitate this thing. Here's the amp, and you can see quite a few waxies that need to be replaced. I thought by 65 that the use of wax capacitors had pretty much ended, but apparently that's not the case. And this amplifier is really not mounted to the motor board. The only thing holding it is the knobs. When it's mounted inside of the cabinet, it's designed so where it's a tight fit inside of the cabinet, and the bottom of the cabinet actually holds the amplifier in place. So that's kind of cheap. Okay, I have the motor disconnected. They were nice enough to use a motor with a disconnect plug on it. And we'll connect a speaker to the amp and troubleshoot it. Okay, we're getting some action there, so that tells me that either we have a break in the cartridge wiring here, or there's a problem with the cartridge mounting bracket. But let's go ahead and deal with the capacitors now. You heard by all the squealing and humming that these old capacitors need to go, so let's take care of that. Oh, there's even a bumblebee capacitor in here. I should take good care of that. I could probably sell that on eBay and get my money back for what I paid for the whole record player. Well, my duh moment for today, the amp is actually held in place by these nuts on the control shafts. I should have known better than to make an assumption that nothing was holding this amplifier in place but the bottom of the cabinet. I'll probably even get a few dislikes for that stupid assumption. Okay, hopefully we won't have any more duh moments for today, so let's proceed with the recap, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. Okay, we've replaced all of the capacitors, the majority of which tested leaky. Sprayed control cleaner in the potentiometers, and I cleaned the tube sockets. I also resoldered the broken leads on the tone arm wiring here. Now let's fire it up and see if we get any amplification. Yeah, I still can't believe what I said earlier about nothing holding this amplifier chassis in place. That just takes the cake. Yeah, that sounds much better. Now, most of these capacitors, I tried to mount them directly to the terminal strip, or the terminal in which they were removed from. However, in some cases, due to the shortness of the leads on the newer capacitors, I had to do a little splicing, as you can see by the blue heat shrink tubing there, but I try to do it as neatly as possible. Okay, now that the amplifier is working, we'll put the bottom plate back on and move to the drive mechanism. And we'll start by removing this clip, and then the turntable should lift off. If it doesn't, we just gently tap the spindle a few times, and then that should break the bond free, and it'll just lift right off, and then we can get to the rest of the mechanism. And we have a standard General Industries drive mechanism. In fact, this same drive mechanism with the knob type speed selector was probably in use for at least 30 years. And examining things, the drive motor is so I can just barely turn it, so it needs to be taken apart and cleaned. chances are this record player was used its entire life and was never given any type of maintenance or anything. They used it until it quit, and then it wound up in the discard pile, which eventually wound up going to the school board surplus auction. Right now will be a good time to clean our drive wheel with rubber renew. Okay, for the exception of replacing the motor mounting grommets and taking this center spindle out and lubricating it, we're done with the actual drive mechanism. Now we have to deal with this motor that's stuck. Hopefully it will come apart easy enough and I can just clean it up and re-lubricate it and it will be fine. Unfortunately it did come apart. I can feel a gummy substance on this shaft, so that tells me that the old lubricant dried up and caused the motor to bind. So we'll just clean that up thoroughly and re-lubricate with the Zoom spout oil and it should be good to go. Okay, looking at this, you can tell by the wear on the motor capstan that the 33 RPM speed was used the most, and you can see the top rung, which is the 16 RPM portion, is bent. If I try to straighten it, I can tell you it's going to break off. It's really no big deal because the only 16 RPM records I have are talking books for the blind, and I have plenty of record players that will play those records, so I'm really not too worried about 16 on this. Yes, it would be nice if the 16 RPM setting would work, but that's not going to be the case unless I can find another motor to get this necessary part here to fix that problem. Okay, we're all put back together. Might have to replace this idler wheel down the road. You can tell it's a little bit worn. I tried to straighten that 16 RPM portion of this capstan and didn't really have much luck. It didn't break off, but it's still not as straight as it could be. Motor runs fine now. That's a plus. Like I said, no big deal about 16 RPM because I have machines that will play those. Okay, we're operating, but the wheel has a little notch in it. You can hear the bump, bump, bump sound. Let's see if it'll play a record. Well, that needle's in better shape than I thought. And here we are with a 78. And just to show you how it operates on 16 RPM with the bent motor capstan, first you can hear the excessive noise that it's making due to all the vibration.
Signed by the Braille Technical Press Incorporated, Robert W. Gunderson, editor. Executive Offices, 980 Waring Avenue, Bronx, New York, 10469. Volume 23, October 1972, number 10. Contents, Side 1. Where to find it?
I can hear the wow and flutter, but it's not as bad as what I thought it would be.
Germanium crystal diode measuring instruments and accessories.
But like I said, the there's not much I can do about that short of replacing either the whole motor or finding a good rotor assembly out of a junk motor. Now, a word about these idler wheels that develop a notch that causes the bump, bump, bump sound as the ladder rotates. That's caused from the turntable being left in one of the 3 or 4 speeds, or 2 speeds, whatever may apply to your particular record player, with it turned off and left sitting that way for an extended period of time. Some of the better classroom record players had a linkage that would move the idler wheel away from the motor capstan when the player was turned off, but a lot of kiddie record players and cheaper classroom record players such as this one don't have that. So when you're not using the player, you need to set the speed selector to the neutral position. And on General Industries motors, like what's in this one, neutral is between 33 and 45. And on models that use an Alliance motor, neutral is usually past the 78 RPM position. So if you'll just take that simple precaution, it'll keep your idler wheel in healthy condition.
From my hair, shake it loose and let it fall.
Okay, there you go, the 1965 RCA classroom record player. Back in operating condition again. Thanks for watching, and we'll do something else again in the near future.
Come and lay down by my side till the early morning light. All I'm she's a super freak, she's super freaking out.
Okay, I've decided to revisit the RCA. This thing works fairly well, but it's a little bit tinny sounding and a little bit weaker than I think it should be. And I was looking at the schematic for this unit, which is pasted in the bottom of the set, and something struck me, and a friend of mine also noticed this too. The shunt resistor across the phono cartridge is only 270 k ohm, and that seems a little bit low for this application. Usually in a situation like this, that resistor is more on the order of, say, 1 meg ohm. So we're going to clip that resistor out of circuit, and we'll use our resistor substitution box to switch in various larger resistors and compare the performance. As you can see on the meter, the resistor actually measures 262 k ohms. Well, there it is with no resistor, and that sounds better. Okay, in the first video, during this portion, I was actually playing a record to demonstrate what various value of cartridge shunt resistors had on the sound, but WMG didn't like that too well, so I'm just going to have to explain to you what I did. The original resistor in this set that was wired across the pickup cartridge was really too low a value, causing the audio to be weak and a little bit tinny sounding. So I removed that resistor from the circuit, and I took this resistance substitution box and clipped it in place of the resistor, and then I selected various value resistors to see which one had the best effect on the audio quality. We started at 220 k ohm and worked our way up to 1.5 meg ohm, and it was determined that 1.5 meg ohm gave us the best results. Actually, it worked with no resistor at all, but it was a little bit too much gain with no resistor, and the audio was distorting a little bit at higher volumes. So going with a 1.5 megohm resistor was a decent compromise, and now the record player sounds better now than it did from the factory. Okay, I'm going to re-upload this video again and hope some other greedy music publisher don't decide to cause me grief. Okay, I went with a 1.5 megohm resistor. It actually, at low volume, it sounds better with no resistor at all, but when you turn the volume up, it distorts due to too much power being fed to the speaker here. So I figure that's probably why they use such a low value resistor in that application. Number one, most of these school record players were mainly used for voice recordings, and since they used a smaller speaker in comparison to the beefier 6x9 speaker that most of these school record players use, they probably decided to use the lower value resistor to cut the gain of the amplifier so the speaker wouldn't sound distorted if you turn the volume up. But the 1.5 megohm resistor helps that situation a little bit, and I'm not going to be playing this at maximum volume, so it won't be any big deal. And the next thing I'm going to do is take notice of this 0.068 microfarad capacitor. One side connects to the chassis, the other side connects to circuit ground, or B-. The purpose of that capacitor is to help isolate the chassis from a hot chassis condition. Although if you have the plug oriented in the wall socket so that the hot side is connected to ground, there's still a risk for getting popped if you touch the chassis or the metal tone arm while your body is in contact with something that has a return path to ground. Usually the value of this capacitor is 0.047. However, I was reading that in today's world, for a piece of equipment to meet UL specifications, that this particular capacitor in this application can't be any bigger than 0.01 microfarad, because anything bigger might cause enough current to pass through to still create a lethal shock hazard if you get tangled up with the chassis. So I think we're going to remove this capacitor and replace it with a 0.015 microfarad AC safety capacitor. Okay, the capacitor replacement went smoothly, and the next thing I want to do is try to enable the 16 RPM speed to work. I know I said I wasn't that concerned about it, but I dug out this junker Phonola record player that's in rather sad cosmetic shape. It also uses a General Industries motor, and the rotor out of that motor is in good shape, or appears to be, so I'm going to try and transplant the rotor out of this motor into this motor, and hopefully we'll have all four speeds back again. Okay, we have our motor fixed up, and as you can see, all four steps on the shaft are in good shape, so we ought to be good to go for 16 RPM now. I'll save the parts out of this motor and put them with this junker phonograph in case I ever decide to do something with that particular unit. I'll have the pieces. Of course, that particular one won't have 16 RPM, but between the two, this is the nicer unit, and I'd rather it be 100% functional, if at all possible. Okay, we're all back together. And that sounds a lot better. So yeah, just a couple of little modifications improve things a great deal. 16 RPM recording.
The Braille Technical Press, October 1972. A radio and electronics guide published monthly for the blind by the Braille Technical Press, Incorporated, Robert W. Gunderson, editor. Executive Offices, 980 Waring Avenue, Bronx, New York, 10469. Volume 23, October 1972, number 10. Contents, Side 1. Where to find it? Digest QST, September 1972. Germanium crystal diode measuring instruments and accessories. Side 2. Germanium crystal diode
As you can hear, that's much better. And here's a 78.
You know we're waiting for a little love, a little kiss on Miami shore.
Okay, well, that'll about do it for the RCA school phonograph. We have the amplifier fixed with a couple of little modifications made. And thanks to this Junker Parts phonograph here, we were able to get the necessary part to enable this thing to run at 16 RPM again. Okay, there you go. Thanks for watching, and we'll repair something else again very soon.
Through the song of the smiling troubadour.